Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are so glad you've joined us for this deep dive into a fascinating collection of sources you've sent our way.
Absolutely. And this material, it centers on this private detective, Gerhard Self, and a really complex investigation he gets pulled into.
Yeah, it's at a huge German industrial company, RCW, based around Mannheim, Ludwigshafen, and it seems Self's own past gets tangled up in it all.
It really does. So our mission here, using the sources you sent, is to, peel back the layers of this story.
Right, it kicks off looking like straightforward corporate crime, but wow, it spirals fast. We're talking explosions, mysterious deaths, deep historical secrets.
And a huge personal journey for Self himself. We're going to try and pull out the key events, the connections, some are pretty surprising, and just see what it tells us about the characters and this whole tangled situation.
Okay, so looking at the sources you shared, where does it all start? How does Self even get involved?
Well, it begins with him being summoned, basically, by a guy named Corton. Now, Corton isn't just some director at RCW.
No, they have history. Knew each other back in high school, apparently.
Exactly. And your sources mention this dynamic. Corton was the popular kid, chauffeur and all that. Self was more on the outside looking in, wearing hand-me-downs.
Right. So Corton brings him in. What's the pitch?
Corton kind of downplays it, calls it a short-term problem. He hands Self off to another director, Ferner, who used to be Corton's assistant, interestingly enough.
And Ferner lays out the actual problem.
Yeah. Ferner details these security breaches happening inside RCW's main computer system, the MBI system.
Okay, and looking at the source material, what kind of breaches are we talking about? Wasn't just like random hacking.
No, not at all. They were very specific. Your sources list things like unauthorized access to mess with payroll,
How so?
giving extra money to certain executive assistants. One named Frau Buchendorf gets mentioned specifically.
Okay.
Also, doubling vacation time for low-wage workers. And this is odd, deleting salary accounts that started with the number 13.
13. That's specific, almost superstitious.
It is weird, right? And it wasn't just money stuff. Confidential communications were being rerouted. Anniversary reminders for employees got suppressed.
And the tennis courts? That detail stuck out.
Oh, yeah, messing with the booking system. So, 108 people turn up for just 16 courts. Chaos.
Digital chaos, yeah.
Yeah.
And the cost, your sources say, was around 5 million marks.
Huge damages. But the real worry, it seems, was how the person was doing it, moving so freely inside the system.
So Ferner's thinking is, what? They have suspects.
Kind of. Ferner apparently thinks they just need to pinpoint the right person from a list. Self's job description sounds almost routine. Investigate, observe, shadow, ask pertinent questions, the usual.
But Self isn't exactly a tech expert, is he? What's his reaction?
No. Your sources note he feels completely out of his depth, like his abacus overwhelmed me. He's dreading having to tinker about with passwords. Definitely not his usual kind of case.
And during this briefing, he also meets Frau Buchendorf, Ferner's assistant, the one who got the extra pay.
That's her, Judith Buchendorf. And the sources give quite a vivid first impression. Tall, slim, 30s, competent looking.
But also some specific details.
Yeah.
The blouse missing buttons.
Yeah, dark blonde hair up, silk blouse, buttons missing, one open near the bottom. Self apparently notices her walk too, even thinks about tight skirts making a comeback.
He's definitely observant, maybe not always just of the case files.
Seems like it. And then there's this small moment right after getting his entry pass to the works, the RCW plant. He feels like he's getting a medal.
Like entering a different league, maybe?
Something like that. So he starts digging into the case files, the dossier on the breaches, and he talks to someone in RCW security, a guy named Schmaltz.
What's Schmaltz's take?
Schmaltz is sure it's an insider. He also talks about the security department trying to, professionalize, move beyond the old guard image, retired cops and dogs. They're even planning a security studies course.
Okay, so Self is just starting to navigate this corporate world, this computer case, and then things take a sharp turn based on your sources.
A very sharp turn. Suddenly, there's this massive explosion near the laboratories at the plant.
Wow. The sources describe it pretty intensely.
Oh, yeah. Vivid details. A cascade of glass shattering, then this deep silence, and then this green cloud spreading. Self is nearby, gets minor cuts, little scratches.
Which Frau Buchendorf later calls a little glitch. seems like a massive understatement.
Right, especially compared to self-experiencing raining glass. And right after the explosion, the smog alarm goes off.
And this was a new system being tested.
Yeah, that's a key detail in your sources. This new tech in the region meant to monitor emissions directly and link them with weather data for early warnings. This event was its baptism of fire.
The irony. The system designed to catch pollution is triggered by a disaster at the company it's monitoring.
Exactly. And the impact is immediate. Traffic halted, roadblocks, police, and gas masks everywhere. Real concern about chlorine gas levels.
Evacuation plans even being discussed for parts of Mannheim and Ludwigshafen.
Yes, serious stuff. Employees potentially stuck at the plant overnight. It's a major incident.
And amidst all that chaos, there's that strange little detail your sources mention. The boy by the river.
Oh, right. Self sees this young boy near the Rhine by the plant, just scooping water out of the river with a bucket and pouring it down a drain. Says he's trying to empty the Rhine.
Kind of poignant, isn't it? A kid's view of this huge environmental scare.
It really is a small human moment in all the industrial drama.
Okay, so the initial case is literally blown up. Where does Self turn his investigation now, according to the sources?
Well, he focuses on that deleted salary account, the one starting with 13. It belonged to a researcher, Schneider.
And Schmaltz from security had information on him.
Yeah, Schmaltz had reported that Schneider had a major gambling problem, so bad that RCW Security had actually stepped in before to help him manage his debts.
Okay, so Schneider had motive, maybe financial desperation. But then
the sources deliver a really grim twist. Shortly after that explosion, Schneider hangs himself in the lab.
and left a note claiming he did the hacking.
Apparently so. But Self, reading the sources, he just doesn't buy it. Schneider sounded broken, desperate. Not like the cold, calculating mind behind those clever breaches.
Doesn't fit the profile.
Yeah.
So if it wasn't Schneider, then who? Self shifts focus.
He does. And your sources point towards the Regional Computer Center, the RCC in Heidelberg. Self heads there, but uses an alias, Gerhard Self.
Smart. And who does he meet there?
He meets this character named Mischkey. The sources paint a pretty clear picture, kind of bony face, mustache, messy hair, these intentionally ugly spectacles, jeans, your classic computer whiz type, maybe.
And he's into music and films. Donna, Barry Lyndon.
Yeah, it seems he had these side interests stored on the system. But Self is there to ask him about the RCW system. Can it be accessed from the outside, from the RCC?
And what's Mischkey's answer?
Mischkey says absolutely, technically possible. Says the RCC and the factory systems are connected via cables. They face off like the two superpowers. He even finds the idea of the RCC being a turntable of industrial spying kind of amusing.
Okay, so that's huge. Mischkey confirms the pathway. The RCC, and maybe Mischkey himself, are now squarely in the frame.
Definitely. And this is where it gets interesting for Self personally. The sources say he develops this really intense focus on Mischkey. It's described as an unhealthy mixture of professional ambition, respect for my opponent, burgeoning jealousy.
Jealousy.
Yeah.
Because of Frau Buchendorf.
Well, that seems to be part of it, because Self then decides to tail Mischkey.
And who does he see Mischkey meeting?
Frau Buchendorf. Judith. He follows them to a lake, watches them together. The sources even mentioned him feeling awkward trying to use binoculars without being noticed by everyone else there.
Shows how involved he's getting, beyond just the case facts.
For sure. And speaking of Judith, things take another dramatic turn soon after, according to your sources.
What happens?
She shows up at Self's office again, but this time it's different. She's not there as Ferner's assistant. She's there privately. She needs his help.
Why? What's happened?
She tells him Mischkey is dead.
Dead.
A car accident, she says. Happened on a railway bridge near Eppelheim, Weiblingen. Skidded, went through the railings, killed instantly. That's the official story.
But she doesn't believe it. Why not, based on the sources?
Several reasons. She says Mischkey was a very confident, careful driver. Plus, he'd been acting really strange lately, withdrawn. And then there was something specific she saw.
Something unsettling.
Yes. She mentions following him to a war cemetery because she didn't believe his story about going to the RCC.
And she saw him meeting someone.
2 men. She describes them stepping out suddenly and quietly from behind a stone block. That's the first real sign that Mischkey was mixed up in something secretive, maybe dangerous, involving unknown people.
Okay, so this changes everything for Self. It's not just computer crime. It's likely murder. How does he start investigating this angle based on the sources?
First, he checks with his doctor friend Philip about blood traces found in Mischkey's wrecked car.
And
Philip confirms the blood type O negative and estimates it's about 2-3 weeks old, which lines up with when Mischkey died.
okay, that's Ambiguous on its own. Could be from the crash.
Mhm.
What else?
Self goes to the actual accident scene, talks to people nearby. He speaks to the wife of the owner of the railway restaurant close to the bridge.
And she heard something.
Yes, she distinctly heard two bangs, one right after the other, around the time it happened.
2 bangs, not just one skid and crash sound. That's significant.
Very. And then he talks to a young girl, Dina, who works at the station cafe.
What did she see?
She saw a strange delivery van speeding away from the bridge right after the crash occurred. Self actually pays her for this information.
Okay, wait. 2 bangs, a speeding delivery van, blood in the car. This doesn't sound like an accident at all. It sounds staged.
Exactly. These details directly contradict the official story. It points strongly towards foul play, maybe involving that van.
And Self finds more clues about Mischkey's activities.
Yes, he goes with Judith to Mischkey's apartment after his death. They look through his stuff. Lots of files, computer printouts about RCW, as you'd expect.
But anything else?
Yes, something really important. They find a newspaper article about RCW's history during World War II, and another piece, a commemorative text called 12 Dark Yards, that specifically mentions forced labor and a trial connected to the company back then.
Ah, so Mischkey wasn't just hacking RCW's present, he was actively digging into its past, its darkest secrets.
That seems to be the key. It suggests a much deeper, more dangerous motive for wanting him silenced than just the computer breaches.
So how does Self start to connect all these pieces? The hacking, the explosion, Mischkey's death, this historical angle.
He decides he needs to pressure someone who might know something. He targets a man named Grimm.
Grimm works at the RCC, right, where Mischkey worked?
Implied, yes, from an earlier interaction. Self confronts Grimm, but he uses a bluff. He suggests there's a witness who saw Grimm near the bridge accident scene.
And he mentions the risk Grimm is taking.
Right. He talks about taking bribes, but also potentially being implicated in a murder investigation. He really turns the screws.
Does it work? Does Grimm talk, according to your sources?
He cracks. Grimm confesses. But it's a bombshell. He says RCW contacted him after Mischkey was already dead.
After. So they didn't ask him to help kill Mischkey?
No. A security guy from RCW named Thomas came to him after the death and asked him to manipulate computer data.
To do what?
To make it look like Mischkey was the one responsible for all those original computer breaches. To frame him posthumously.
Wow. So the framing was a cover-up after the fact.
Exactly. And Grimm was paid well for it. The sources mention a suitcase full of fresh banknotes. It proves RCW was actively trying to pin everything on the dead Mischkey.
That changes the whole picture. It means RCW had a massive reason to want Mischkey blamed, whether he was the original hacker or not. Maybe he knew too much about something else entirely.
Or maybe he was the hacker, but he also stumbled onto the historical stuff and that got him killed. And RCW used the hacking as a convenient posthumous explanation.
Self's gut feeling must be screaming murder now.
Definitely. Your sources talk about his intuition, these shreds of thought telling him Mischkey's death was deliberate and linked to RCW.
So what does he do? He can't just go to the police with this confession from Grimm, maybe.
It seems not. He decides to take matters into his own hands based on his suspicions. He gets some information, possibly a key or knowledge about delivery vans, from someone named Hemmelskopf. Sounds like a locksmith or expert.
And uses that info too.
To sneak back into the RCW plant at night, he uses his old entry pass, a big risk.
What's he looking for?
He finds a hidden old hangar on the premises. And inside, 3 old panel trucks, an Opel, a Mercedes, and a Citroen.
The Citroen delivery van, like the one Dina saw near the bridge.
That's the one. He checks it out. It's still roadworthy. One of the keys he got fits the ignition.
And the crucial part, evidence.
Yes, he finds old dried blood on the steering wheel and a blood-stained cloth on the passenger seat.
Does he know the blood type?
He likely suspects it matches the O negative found in Mischkey's car, the type Philip identified. This van is the missing link. It connects the bridge incident directly to RCW property.
But getting out isn't easy, right? The sources mention an escape.
No, he messes up. Accidentally opens the main hangar doors, sets off alarms. Security guards, even a dog named Energy and Stamina, apparently come after him.
How does he get away?
He has to make a run for it and ends up jumping into the Rhine River to escape. Luckily, his friend Philip finds him and pulls him onto his boat.
Okay, safe for now, on Philip's boat. Does Self figure it all out then? Put the pieces together?
Yes. Talking it over with Philip, he develops his main theory. He connects the delivery van, those 2 bangs the woman heard, and the recent death of Schmaltz Sr.
Schmaltz Sr., the father of the security guy's Self. spoke to earlier. How does he fit in?
Self's theory is that it was Schmaltz Sr. who drove that Citroen van, that he used it to deliberately push or ram Mischkey's car off the bridge railing.
And that explains the other clues.
It could. The physical effort might have injured Schmaltz Sr., explaining the blood in the van. Maybe he died from those injuries a couple of weeks later.
And the two bangs.
Could be the sound of the van hitting Mischkey's car, and then Mischkey's car hitting the tracks or the ground below after being pushed off. It fits.
Wow, that's intricate and incredibly dark. Schmaltz Sr., an old RCW security hand, kills Mischkey.
And then other people in RCW security, like Thomas working with Grimm, frame Mischkey after he's dead. It suggests a conspiracy within RCW security itself, or at least a willingness to cover up actions taken by one of their own.
Was Schmaltz Sr. acting alone? On orders? We don't know.
The sources don't seem to explicitly state that, but the cover-up implies higher knowledge or approval within RCW.
And then just when you think it can't get deeper, your sources bring in this huge historical dimension directly involving Self's past.
Right. Self takes a trip all the way to San Francisco.
Why there?
To meet Frau Hirsch. She was the partner of a Professor Weinstein, now deceased.
Weinstein, wasn't he a key witness in a post-World War II trial?
He was, a trial involving two men named Tyberg and Donkey, who worked for or with RCW during the war. And Frau Hirsch tells Self something shattering.
What is it?
She reveals that Professor Weinstein's testimony in that trial, the testimony that convicted Tyberg and Donkey, was false. He'd been forced to lie.
Coerced. By who?
By someone from the works, meaning RCW and an SS officer. Pressure from both industry and the Nazi regime.
And the devastating part for Self is he was the prosecutor in that trial.
Yes. He realizes his successful prosecution, which led to a death sentence for Tyberg, partly on trumped-up charges like racial defilement, was based on lies. A massive miscarriage of justice engineered by powerful forces connected to RCW.
What was the trial actually about, according to your sources? What were Tyberg and Domke accused of?
Sabotaging the Nazi war effort, specifically by withholding important research. They claimed they only postponed it, but Weinstein's false testimony provided the crucial element of intent, saying they deliberately suppressed it to bring about a quick end to the war.
So this historical conspiracy involved framing these men, likely to protect someone or something at RCW, or perhaps figures connected to both RCW and the SS.
Exactly. Self starts wondering who specifically could have orchestrated it back then. Tyberg, whom Self meets later, suggests a name: Weissmuller.
This isn't just backstory, then. It establishes this long pattern, doesn't it? Decades of manipulation, framing people, cover-ups, all tied to RCW and protecting the works.
It makes the present-day events framing Mischkey, covering up his death, seem almost like standard operating procedure for certain elements connected to the company.
A consistent willingness to sacrifice individuals for the company's sake.
Or for the sake of powerful people within it.
So Self now sees all these connections. The original hacking case, Mischkey digging too deep, his murder and the subsequent framing, and Korten, who is now high up in RCW, having his own links to that dark past. Tyberg even mentions Korten helped him escape after the trial.
Right. Korten is the common thread, bridging the past and the present, embodying that continuity of power and potential ruthlessness at RCW.
So Self makes a decision. What does he do?
He decides he has to confront Korten directly.
Where does this happen?
He tracks Korten down to his holiday home in Brittany, France. Finds him out walking near the cliffs.
A dramatic setting. And Self just tells him.
Pretty much. According to the sources, Self just says, "I know everything."
And Korten's reaction? Does he deny it? Feign ignorance?
No. He seems to understand immediately what Self means. He doesn't deny his involvement in the past events, but tries to justify them, defends his wartime actions as necessary for the works.
And Mischkey. And Schmaltz Sr.
He regrets what happened to Domke back then, but dismisses Mischkey as someone who just dug himself deeper and deeper into trouble. He basically writes off Schmaltz Sr.'s actions at the bridge as an unfortunate mistake by an overeager veteran that just had to be kept quiet.
So, complete rationalization. No real remorse for the deaths and manipulations, and Self listens to all this, and then what?
The sources describe a moment where Self thinks, "I know what I had to do."
And he acts on it.
Yes. He pushes Korten off the cliff.
Wow. Just pushes him. What's Self's immediate reaction?
The description in your sources is powerful. His whole body was trembling, and yet I felt lighter than I had in a long time. A complex mix of shock and maybe release.
So, Korten is dead. Self travels back. What happens next, according to the sources? Does anyone suspect him?
He worries about potential witnesses on his journey back, but nothing seems to come of it. The official news reports frame Corton's death exactly as you might expect.
An accident.
A tragic accident while walking on the cliffs. And your sources add this chilling detail. The press releases and positive biographical material already prepared for Corton's upcoming 70th birthday were just rolled out for his obituaries.
So, his public image is protected, even in death. A final layer of corporate spin. Convenient for his family too, presumably?
Yes, the sources mention it benefits his son's career.
And Self himself. How does he process what he's done?
He's deeply conflicted. The sources show him questioning himself. What had I done? Come to terms with my past, wipe my hands of it. He doesn't feel heroic. He concludes that the world wasn't a better place for Corton's death.
No sense of justice achieved.
Apparently not. He refuses to go to the funeral, won't send condolences. He just distances himself.
Does he see Judith, Frau Buchendorf? Again.
Yes, he meets with her after he gets back. She's obviously devastated, learning the truth about Mischkey's death being murder and the cover-up. She feels more at a loss than ever.
And Self's feelings towards her.
It's complicated. Sadness, guilt, feeling used by the situation, maybe even a touch of pride in figuring it out, but mostly just messy.
And what happens to Judith?
Your sources say she leaves RCW, starts working in a women's bookshop. There's an awkwardness between her and Self now, despite everything they went through.
And that security course Schmalz mentioned. Does Self end up teaching it?
No. Thomas, the security guy involved in the framing, actually offers him the job later, but Self turns it down. He recognizes you can't exactly use cases like this RCW mess as teaching examples. Too real, too dark.
Absolutely. And throughout this whole intense story, your sources weave in bits of Self's personal life, right? Adds depth to him.
Definitely. We see his cat, Turbo, this little anchor of normalcy. His friendships are important. Philip, the loyal doctor with the boat, always there to help him out of scrapes, literally.
And his card-playing friends, Eberhard and Willie.
Yeah, they provide this space for him to mull over things, guilt, death. Your sources even include the detail about Willie passing away, the funeral, mentioning screech owls, adds this layer of mortality.
And his relationship with Brigitte Lauterbach seems complex.
Very. This raven mother figure, as she's described. They have this on-again, off-again thing. She leaves Brazil, comes back, they finally part ways. Adds to his sense of a life marked by complicated connections and maybe some loneliness.
Plus his physical ailments, like the rheumatism.
Right, grounds him in reality. All these details build a picture of him beyond just the detective, his reflections on aging, on truth, on the general impurity of the world, as he calls it.
Your sources also briefly touch on another case he worked on, didn't they? The Menke insurance fraud.
Yeah, it's a side plot. Sigurd Schmenke, a ballet dancer, breaks his leg, claims 1,000,000 marks from insurance, self-investigates, even goes to Pittsburgh.
And there's ambiguity there, too.
Yes. He talks to colleagues in Pittsburgh, and one, Joschka, suggests Menke might have actually faked the injury, just wrapped his leg convincingly, despite having plans for a dancing school.
So even in a smaller case, there's this theme of potential deception. Things not being what they seem. The difficulty of knowing the real truth.
Exactly. It echoes the main plot's complexities. And significantly, your sources say Self never really forms a final opinion on whether Menke faked it or not. He leaves that ambiguity unresolved.
Well, that was certainly a deep dive. We went through a lot based on the sources you provided, starting with what looked like a straightforward, if serious, corporate computer crime.
Yeah, and watching it unfold into this massive web involving explosions, murder, a sophisticated cover-up rooted in corporate security.
And then connecting all the way back to this dark World War II conspiracy involving RCW, false testimony, the SS, a history that Self himself was unknowingly part of as a young prosecutor.
Culminating in that incredibly personal, violent confrontation between Self and Corton on the cliffs.
Looking back at your initial sources, it's clear how digging into them this way reveals so many layers, these unexpected links across decades, and details that really bring the whole thing to life. You wouldn't get that from just a summary.
Absolutely not. The richness is in those connections and specifics.
So for you listening, thinking about the material you shared with us, what does this whole story bring up for you? Maybe questions about truth, about justice, especially when powerful institutions are involved, about how much the past, even hidden history, really does shape our present.
And maybe think about that ending reflection from Self. Corton is dead, the man responsible for so much manipulation and complicit in death, but Self feels the world isn't actually any better for it. What does that suggest? When acts of vengeance or settling scores don't bring real resolution, especially when the official systems have failed or are corrupt, What kind of justice, if any, is actually possible?
Definitely a lot to think about there based on the material you provided. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.